Come right round, folks. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Welcome to Her Majesty's Royal Palace and Fortress, the Tower of London, which is designated as a World Heritage Site. My name is John, and for the next 6 hours, we're going to take a trip through that fortress where I'm going to point out to you some of the more famous buildings and tell you a few stories along the way. And from my experience, people generally come to the Tower to see 4 things. The first is to meet a beefeater. Tick, you're doing that right now. And if you allow me right at the end of my tour, I'll tell you a little bit about our history here at the Tower of London. The second thing is to come and look at the crown jewels and royal regalia. Am I right, ladies?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a few nervous men here now. Well, I'd just like to say, I actually don't lead you on a tour through the jewels. You do that entirely yourselves, but I'll certainly point out where they are located. The third thing that people are interested in is the legend, and indeed to have a look at the Tower Ravens. I'm sure most of you are aware that the legend does state if the Ravens ever left the Tower of London, that would all pile into dust, the monarchy would fall, and there'd be great harm upon the nation. Well, the buildings are still standing. The Queen is enjoying a breakfast over at Buckingham Palace, and according to the Sky News, all is well. So that tells you that the Ravens are still inside there, and it's up to you to go and find them. But can I remind you that they are indeed wild animals, and they certainly enjoy little children's fingers. So be very careful. The last thing that people are generally interested here at the Tower is torture and execution. Am I right? Yeah. Now I've got your level. Well, can I remind you that this place was designed and still retains its title as a royal palace and a fortress. It was never designed to hold prisoners. But clearly, prisoners and execution do make up a large part of our story. So of course I will be talking about that as we go through the next hour or so. But I think it's really important that we go right back to the beginning and we start our story in the year 1066, when William, Duke of Normandy, better known as William the Conqueror, defeated the Anglo-Saxon King Harold at the Battle of Hastings. Anyone in from the United Kingdom, put your hands up. That's your history test done for the day, well done. And for the rest of you from overseas, you need to be aware, because in my tour there's always a test. If you get it wrong, we're coming straight back here and starting all again, so pay attention. Now, William was crowned King William I on Christmas Day of that same year, but he spent the next 12 years fighting his newly conquered subjects, and they didn't take too kindly to Norman domination. William therefore ordered to find somewhere where he could dominate the people who lived here in London. And eventually they chose a site just inside the eastern edge of the city wall, where once an old Roman fort had stood. So it was here in the year 1078 he authorised the building of his first royal palace and fortress here in his country. Today we refer to that building as the White Tower, and it's located behind those walls. No point looking. It's going to be a long hour, I can tell. But don't worry, you'll see that building a bit later in the tour. The next 200 years, however, successive monarchs continue to add to the defences of the White Tower, and we'll talk more about that on our journey inside. But whilst we're in this position here, we're in the ideal location to talk about the first line of defence to the White Tower, because indeed we are stood inside the moat. Now it's some 120 feet wide, and when fully excavated is 15 feet deeper than we see it today. It was designed to use the tidal flow of the River Thames, and twice a day the river would flow into and around the moat, and thereby keeping it clean. Or so we thought. because it also became the largest public toilet in all of London. And I'll just let you hang on that for a moment. Now, of course, being English, we reacted to the problem very quickly. We called in engineers, scientists, and all sorts of experts to see what they could do to solve this embarrassing and very smelly problem. And eventually, they came up with a simple solution some 500 years later. Empty it. Some things don't change in this country, I can tell you. Now, the man who was in charge of the tower at that time was probably the most famous general of the British Army, the very famous Duke of Wellington. He then ordered to have this area filled with sand and shingle up to the height that we see today and put it to good use as an exercise area and a parade ground for all his soldiers who were based here at that time. Right, we ready to move on to executions? Yep? Yeah. Happy with that? Okay. Everyone turn and face that direction over there. Can you all see that large white building? Right, we'll try that again. Can we all see that large white building?
Yes.
Good. Just to the left of it is an open area, which is known as Tower Hill. And it was up there where many public executions took place between the 14th and 18th century. No less than 75 men of noble birth were to lose their heads up there by means of block and axe. So on the day of execution, the prisoner would be escorted from the tower by us, the yeoman warders, and brought up to those gates behind me over there, where the prisoner would be handed over to the sheriffs of London, who were then responsible for getting that man up onto that hill. The prisoner would be made to climb the steps, so he then stood on top of the large wooden scaffold site, where he literally greeted by thousands of people who turned up to witness those proceedings. The condemned man would be allowed to deliver his final speech and then, no doubt, say his prayers. He would then kneel down and place his neck on a block of oak. And with a word or a signal, the executioner would bring his axe crashing down onto that victim's neck and hopefully behead them with just one stroke. Notice that word, hopefully, because it was not always the case. In fact, on one occasion, it took 5 attempts. And even then, the executioner had to use a carving knife to complete the task. The executioner would pick up that severed and still bleeding head and turn to the assembled crowd would proclaim, "Behold the head of a traitor. So die all traitors. God save the King." And at that point there, the crowd would cheer. Right. It's very simple, this. For the next hour, I'm doing 99.9% of the work. On the very few occasions, however, I'm going to hand it over to you. It'd be great to get the same enthusiasm back this way. Now, I'm not after an Oscar or a BAFTA award. It'd be great to know that you're enjoying your time with me. That was one of those moments. And as a group, you failed miserably. Now, lucky for you, I'm a fair man. And I do believe giving everyone at least one chance. So we'll give it another go. And if it's not to the required standard, I'm out of here. I'll go back to my house and start re-watching the Game of Thrones. You're cool. Pay attention. Sure. Tough question I've put up for you. Don't let yourself down in front of the rest of the audience. You ready? Which hand was the head in? My left? That one? Sure? Sure? Convinced? Good, well done. Relax now. Behold the head of a traitor! Hang on. Wait for the punchline. We've only got an hour to do this, you know. Third time lucky, here we go. Behold, the head of a traitor! So die all traitors! God save the king! You enjoying this? Buy a ticket then. The head was then taken down and placed onto Soldiers' Pike and carried from the streets of London towards London's Bridge. Notice I'm pointing in that direction and not towards that magnificent bridge which is around the corner there, which we all know is called
Tower Bridge.
You'd be surprised how many people get that wrong. The old London Bridge was the only bridge across the River Thames in those days. The heads were covered in tar, then boiled, then placed on that bridge as a sign of fate that awaits all would-be traitors. Meanwhile, the headless corpse had been taken down, placed into a small handcart and brought quickly back into the tower where we buried inside the Royal Chapel. You enjoyed it so far?
Yeah.
Are we going to continue?
Yes.
Brilliant. Well, the way it's going to work now then is I'm going to bulldoze my way through the crowd and you lovely people need to stay on my coattails as we move rapidly, which is a military term for quickly, to the next part of the tour. Are we ready?
Yes.
Let's go.